In the Middle Ages, a new civilization was born in Europe. Nobles and kings, faith and war, culture and learning, trade and new ideas. These built the foundation of the modern world. This is the story of how Europe was born. Romans, Christians, barbarians long ago, the Roman Empire ruled the lands around the Mediterranean Sea. This was a time of peace and comfort. People called it the Roman peace. Life was good. The government was strong. The roads and cities worked well. Far in the east of the empire, a new religion began. It was called Christianity. At first it was small. Slowly, more and more people joined. By the 4th century, the emperors themselves accepted it. It became the official religion of Rome. But by then, Rome was already in trouble. There was not enough food. Sickness spread. Enemies attacked from outside. It became too hard to rule such a huge empire from one place. So, in the year 395, Rome split into two parts. The western part kept Rome as its capital. The eastern part was ruled from a city called Constantinople. People call this the Byzantine Empire. The east stayed rich and strong. The west grew poor and weak. Far outside the empire's borders in the deep forests, other peoples were moving. We call them barbarians. Most were German tribes led by warrior chiefs. These tribes pushed harder and harder against Rome's borders. In time, Rome had no choice. It let them come in. Soon, the borders broke completely. New peoples moved in and took land for themselves. Rome's power was falling apart. In the year 476, one of these leaders removed the last Roman emperor from power. The emperor was only a boy. He had no real power. But his fall marked something huge. The Western Roman Empire had ended. People later called the years after this the Dark Ages. Romans, Christians, barbarians. These three groups came together and built the world we call medieval Europe. Germanic kingdoms, around the year 500, new kingdoms covered Europe. Barbarian kings ruled them. Their leaders were a mix of Romans and barbarians. Slowly they became Christian. The strongest kingdoms were the Ostrogoths in Italy, the Visigoths in Spain, and the Franks in France. But these new kingdoms had big problems. The old Roman cities were empty. Some were even in ruins. The roads fell apart. Trade and communication became difficult. Money almost disappeared. Without money, kings could not pay soldiers. Fewer people could read and write. This made it hard to run a government. And most of all, there was no peace, no safety. Life in Western Europe became small and local. Each region went its own way. In these early years, Western Europe was much weaker than its neighbors. Heirs of Rome. In the 500s, a Byzantine emperor named Justinian tried to take back the West and rebuild Rome's old glory. He conquered Italy, but soon a new group called the Lombards took it from him. The Byzantines had to accept it. East and West would stay divided forever. But soon, another new division appeared, this time between North and South. In the 600s, Arab armies moved fast across the Middle East and North Africa. They built a huge Islamic empire called a caliphate. Now there were three civilizations, not one: Islamic, Byzantine, and medieval Europe. For a short time in the 700s, it looked like Europe might fall to this new power too. Muslim armies destroyed the kingdom in Spain. Then they pushed into France. But in the year 732, at the Battle of Tours, the Franks stopped them. Their leader was Charles Martel. The advance was stopped, and Charles gave his name to a new family line that would change history, the Carolingians. The Carolingian Empire. Charles Martel's son, Pepin the Short, took the Frankish throne by force. He fought the Lombards in Italy and gave the Pope his own land to rule. Pepin's son became famous. His name was Charlemagne. He became king in the year 768. For decades, he fought wars and grew his kingdom. By the end, he ruled most of Western Christian Europe. In the year 800, the Pope crowned him Emperor of the Romans. For the first time in over 300 years, the West had an emperor again. The Carolingian Empire was the first great power of medieval Europe. It left a lasting mark. Charlemagne supported art and learning. This was the first of several rebirths of old Roman and Greek knowledge in the Middle Ages. His empire spread new ideas everywhere, forms of government, titles, ranks, and dreams. Most importantly, it spread one big idea, a united Christian Europe. This idea became the foundation of medieval life. Falling apart? But the Carolingian Empire did not last. Ruling from one center was too hard. Cities were small, the economy was weak, communication was poor. After Charlemagne died, his 3 grandsons fought each other. In the year 843, they signed the Treaty of Verdun and split the empire into 3 parts. The middle part soon shrank away. What remained became 2 lands, West Francia, which later became France, and East Francia, which later became Germany. These lands kept breaking into smaller pieces, and new attacks made this even worse. In the 800s and 900s, new invaders attacked from every direction. The Vikings came from the north. They sailed the rivers and coasts, raiding towns. The Magyars, also called Hungarians, rode in from the east, attacking undefended villages, and Muslim raiders landed along the southern coasts. Europe was under attack from every side. The rise of feudalism. As Europe suffered these attacks, kings grew weaker. Local lords grew stronger. Wooden castles spread across the land. Local noble families used them as homes and fortresses. From these castles, lords controlled the peasants nearby and took their crops and labor. Lord ruled through force. In earlier times, peasants fought as foot soldiers in wars, but new war tools like the stirrup made horse-riding soldiers far more powerful. This new style of war cost a lot. Only nobles had enough money for it, so Europe's nobles became full-time warriors. In this world of warrior nobles, power came through a system called vassalage. One noble would give another noble land and protection. In return, that noble promised loyalty and military service. Kingdoms became a web of personal promises and duties. Kings were often weak. Strong nobles could easily overpower them. People call this system feudalism. It would take centuries before strong, central governments returned to Europe. Changing times. In the 900s, things began to change. The weather improved. Farms produced more food. Vikings and Hungarians stopped attacking. They settled down and joined Christian Europe. And in some places, kings began to grow stronger again. In Britain, King Alfred the Great and the kings after him united the different Anglo-Saxon lands. For the first time, there was one kingdom of England. In West Francia, the land was still divided, but the Vikings who had settled in the north swore loyalty to the French king. They became French and Christian. People called them the Normans. Their land, Normandy, protected France from other raiders. In East Francia, a king named Otto I defeated the Hungarians in the year 955 at the Battle of Lechfeld. This ended the attacks from the east. the Hungarians settled down and built their own Christian kingdom. In the year 962, Otto was crowned emperor. Once again, Europe had an empire, this time a German one. Later, people called it the Holy Roman Empire. After centuries of chaos, Europe was finally becoming stable and confident. It was ready for a new chapter. Growth. The year 1000 was a turning point. It began 300 years of growth and success. Better weather and new farming methods led to more food and more people. New town appeared. Old towns grew bigger. Forests were cut down to make room for farms. This growth also brought trade back to life. Busy trade routes filled the growing cities. Cities became centers for a new group of people, merchants. These merchants freed themselves from the control of local lords. Many cities began ruling themselves. This happened most in Italy, where merchants brought Mediterranean trade back to life. As life improved, art, buildings, and music flourished. More people learned to read. The first universities opened, supported by the church. Scholars began studying Old Greek and Roman knowledge again. This was a new rebirth of learning. But Europe did more than grow at home. It also began to expand outward. Expansion. During this period, nobles from the old Frankish lands conquered new territory. This spread the borders of Christian Europe. Historians call this the Europeanization of Europe. It made European civilization bigger and more united. In the year 1066, William, Duke of Normandy, invaded England. At the Battle of Hastings, he defeated the English. England became a Norman land. In Spain, Christian kingdoms in the north slowly took back land from Muslim rulers in the south. People called this the Reconquest. In southern Italy and Sicily, Norman warriors took land from the Byzantines and Muslims. They joined forces with the Pope and built their own kingdom. In Eastern Europe, German nobles and farmers moved east, settling on Slavic lands. But Europeans looked even further. In the year 1095, Pope Urban II called on Christians to fight for Jerusalem and take it back from Muslim control. Armies of crusaders marched east and built small states along the Mediterranean coast. These states were weak. Over the next 200 years, Muslim forces took them back one by one. Still, the Crusades sent an important message. The Catholic Church had woken up, and it was ready to lead. The Church. In the early Middle Ages, the Pope had little real power outside Italy. The Church was just a loose group of priests and monks, controlled by local nobles. In the 900s and thousands, a new movement began. Its goal, to reform the church and society. They wanted to free the church from the control of kings and nobles and turn it into its own strong power. Pope Gregory VII, a strong reformer, clashed with Emperor Henry IV over who had the right to appoint bishops. In the first part of this conflict, Henry stood for 3 days in the snow outside a castle at Canossa, begging for the Pope's forgiveness. But the fight was not over. Later, Henry invaded Rome and put his own pope in power, sending Gregory into exile. It looked like the emperor had won, but by the 1100s it was clear the pope and the reformers had truly won. The church became a strong, organized power, with its own laws, offices, and money. At the very top stood the Pope, ruling the church almost like a king. As popes grew more powerful, kings grew jealous. Soon, kings began building the same kind of strong, organized power for themselves, nobles and kings. For a long time, Kings were limited by the power of armed nobles. In this period, the number of nobles grew. So did the number of castles, now built from their stone instead of wood, bigger and stronger than before. Noble life also changed. A new ideal appeared, the Christian knight, following a code of honor called chivalry. But at the same time, in some places, kings began to grow stronger than the nobles. In England, the Norman kings built a small, tightly ruled state, much more organized than most of Europe. In Spain, the fight to take back land from Muslim rulers made Christian kings stronger, helping them build unified states. In France, the kings of the Capetian family slowly grew their own lands, and a real French state began to form. But in the Holy Roman Empire, the opposite happened. The once powerful empire broke apart into many small, independent territories. Emperor Frederick Barbarossa tried to bring back the empire's old strength. He failed. The title of emperor became mostly symbolic, given out by a small group of electors. This period brought farming growth, city growth, expansion, stronger popes, stronger kings, and rich culture. But around the year 1300, the weather turned bad. Growth stopped, hunger spread. A great disaster was coming. The Black Death. The 1300s were a turning point in European history. In the year 1347, a deadly plague reached Europe. We call it the Black Death. It spread fast across the continent. Within a few years, it killed about 1/3 of all the people in Europe. It was one of the worst disasters in human history. Whole towns disappeared. The plague would return again and again for centuries. But over time, in the 1300s and 1400s, Europe slowly recovered. And for some survivors, the results were not all bad. With fewer people, land became easier to get. Workers became more valuable because fewer people were left to work. Peasants and workers gained more power to demand better lives. When lords refused, revolts broke out across Europe. Most were crushed by force, but the change could not be stopped. In Western Europe, peasants slowly gained more freedom. Workers earned better pay. Out of this dark time, new ideas and inventions appeared. People built windmills and water mills. They invented eyeglasses. They found better ways to make metal. And most importantly, they invented the printing press. Cities recovered quickly, and new culture bloomed. In Italy, a new movement began, the Renaissance. Its goal was to bring back, and even go beyond, the achievements of ancient Greece and Rome. Renaissance thinkers began to see the world in a new way, including how they saw the place of human beings in it. They looked back at the last 1,000 years and called it the Dark Ages. In doing this, they placed themselves as the bridge between the medieval and modern worlds, war and the modern state. In the late 1300s and 1400s, gunpowder changed war forever. Now, a simple foot soldier could kill even the bravest knight from far away. Even the strongest castle could be destroyed with cannons. Building an army with guns and cannons cost a huge amount of money. Only kings had that kind of wealth, so kings worked to control all military power in their lands. This made them stronger than the nobles. Nobles lost their old advantage in battle. Many became officials and advisors to the king, instead of warriors. This is how the modern centralized state began to form. During this time, Europe's new weapons were tested again and again in war. The 100 Years' War between England and France badly damaged the French countryside. A young peasant girl named Joan of Arc changed the course of the war. She led French troops to victory, and eventually England was pushed out of France. In Spain, the marriage of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile united the country. Together, their armies conquered Granada, the last Muslim kingdom in Spain. These events laid the groundwork for the modern nations of England, France, and Spain. Other regions, like Germany and Italy, would have to wait many more centuries to become united countries. Looking ahead, by the end of the Middle Ages, Europe had not only recovered from the Black Death, it had rebuilt itself on a strong new foundation. Its focus was now turning outward toward the rest of the world. By the year 1500, Portugal had sailed around Africa and into the Indian Ocean, opening new trade routes to the east. At the same time, Spain sailed west across the Atlantic Ocean and reached the Americas. Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492 is often seen as the moment the Middle Ages ended and the modern world began. In the centuries that followed, European expansion would change the entire world and help create the world we live in today.